putting the scared back in eschatology, let's talk about Rapture-Palooza.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back. We are back, the Eye of the Storm podcast. Daniel, please do your thing and introduce today's series.
So this is Have You Seen, in which we talk about a movie that some of us know well and others have just seen for the first time. This week, we are talking about the 2013 comedy Rapture-Palooza, which tells the story of Ben and Lindsay, who have just survived the rapture, in which most people have been removed from the world as the biblical end times have begun. They are trying to survive in this world, and they take a job with the Antichrist, who takes an interest in Lindsay, and then Lindsay and Ben hatch a plan to imprison the Antichrist in order to kind of free humanity from his tyranny. And then the plot unfolds from there. So you guys have just seen Rapture-Palooza for the first time, right? So what was your takeaway?
I mean, firstly, actually, while I was watching this, I was thinking of Jonathan, because I know you're quite religious. I was like, I really wonder what Jonathan's thinking about all of this. I was like, is he gonna find the funny in it? Is he gonna be offended? I didn't know, and it's gonna be interesting to kind of hear your take on it. But this was actually quite nostalgic, because I've not seen a really stupid, wacky comedy like this in quite some time. And I'm talking, things like Pineapple Express or This Is the End and stuff like that, where it's just stupid, but it's entertaining. And at first, because I haven't watched something like that in a while, at first I was like, it's a bit dumb. What are we doing here? But very quickly, you kind of just settle into the weirdness and the wackiness of the movie. It's an hour and 25 minutes. So it's just get in, have some dumb fun with the movie, get out, and that's it. You haven't wasted too much of your time. It was fun. It was and I wouldn't say it was laugh out loud funny. It's not my favorite of that particular genre. I think there's some movies that have done it better, but I think for sure there was elements of it that I was like, yeah, okay, this is quite funny. The kind of setup of the world and stuff like that. I kind of appreciate that they made an effort with some of the stuff that they were doing and incorporating into the jokes, the blood rain and the rocks falling from the sky, and how after very quickly people just kind of fell into it being normal life and just kind of carried on on their day to day. That kind of added to the humor of it. But I don't know. There's not too much to say in the kind of spoiler-free review other than it was just really, I don't know. It was just really entertaining in a really stupid way. In a way that it's just do you know when they say you should kind of turn your brain off and just enjoy the movie? This is the type of movie you do it for, not some of the other ones that they try to convince you to do it for. This is the type where you just kind of roll with it. But yeah, I don't know. I'll hand over to you, Jonathan.
All right, so let me start off by saying I am Christian. You know what I'm saying? I do have a relationship with my Lord Jesus Christ and Savior. So, when obviously Daniel recommended this and obviously I saw the trailer, I said, okay, after watching the trailer, my number one concern was if they were going to mock Jesus in a vulgar, personal type of manner. Because a lot of these, directors, script writers, their scripts reflect a lot of the times, not all the times, but a lot of the times it reflects their personal feelings. So that was one of my main concerns. However, what I can say is I didn't view it as that. Quite frankly, I had a cool time. I'll definitely say I was it was funny. I enjoyed the kind of that awkward humor, as well as the chemistry amongst the cast. I felt like the chemistry amongst the cast was really, really good. From just not even the main characters, but everyone. I thought okay, number one, I like the humor. Number one, I like what I'm seeing and how they're acting and just how they're performing. There were definitely times where I giggled, especially from the Antichrist, and I'm actually glad that most of the mocking and just the focus was on the Antichrist rather than my Lord Jesus Christ himself. So overall, I had a cool time with this one. It was cool. It wasn't memorable. Don't get it twisted, I ain't gonna watch it again. But at the same time, I definitely did giggle a few times. So I didn't feel no mad blasphemy when watching this film.
So first of all, I don't think this is really a movie about religion. I think there's other stuff going on in this, and we'll get into that. And I do think there is something going on here. It's not simply a bundle of jokes, and there is criticism of religion in this. So one of them is, for instance, the only really religious church-related character we see is the televangelist, right? who in the beginning gives us the info dump, who kind of explains what the rapture is, right? And what the prophecies are. Notably, he does not get raptured. He just becomes an alcoholic and keeps talking on TV. That is one commentary in this, right? That or if all the good people are taken, the preachers remain, or the preacher remains.
Mm.
Any
But that's
thoughts on that one?
but that's realism, though. I didn't have an issue with that because I don't know if you see what's going on now, especially a lot of these African preachers. Like there's a guy called Pastor Toby from Spac Nation. That guy, if I see him in heaven, then I'll be doubting myself if I'm in heaven. Honestly, if I see him in the afterlife, that's how crazy it is. So honestly, so there's realism in that as well. Even though that is, you can tell that is from a personal point of view. Like I wouldn't say insecurity, but it comes from somewhere and a personal place, right? From the makers of this film. It's definitely a valid point because there are a lot of people, within the church, especially. And I say church because church and a relationship with God are two completely different things. People think, just that's a different subject for another day, but just know they're completely two different things. A lot of people are the reason why people think Christianity is bad. It's not God. God's not bad. It's the people. So I do, with that point, what you just mentioned there with, the priest staying back, I was like, yeah, that's what's, if this was to happen, it would be facts. A lot of these priests would be in hell, man. They would get taken if there was a rapture, that's for sure.
You can also kind of relate it to the mum as well of, I can't remember whose mum she was, but the one that actually got raptured, got to heaven, and then got sent back because, she's like, a Christian woman, she's like, churchgoer, etc. But then she just had like these like bad traits within her that they were like, okay, no, we can't deal with this. Like, you're clearly not all good or whatever. I thought that was like quite funny in terms of like it's more kind of almost speaking to someone thinking that they're holier than thou, but then they still have some type of sort of negative traits. Or I wouldn't even say like she was like a sinner or anything like that, because like what she got kicked out for was stupid because it was like arguing with someone about the line or something along the lines.
This movie predates the idea of a Karen, right? I think this is already an outdated reference, but this whole idea of I want to speak to the manager, that kind of person, which I think gets a bad rep. If something doesn't work well, you should talk to the manager, right? So people kind of have taken that idea of that entitled person who always wants their way and taking it a little bit far. But anyway, she gets kicked out of heaven for complaining and asking to see the manager because it's poorly run.
And you know what? That idea isn't even really like her getting kicked out of heaven. I found that really funny as well, especially the way her reactions to a lot of things that were happening. Like she was one of my favorite characters. But I didn't really find that too far fetched. I was like, you know what? That's low key, like, because obviously angels get kicked. Like, a lot of angels back in the day, but like way back in the day, they got kicked out of heaven. Like Lucifer's the most famous one. So when I saw that she got kicked out of heaven, that actually for some reason that scene made me laugh the most, especially that she was mixed with being a Karen as well. So yeah, it was just funny, man. They mixed realism with, I was gonna say history, but yeah.
Yeah, history is stretching it a little bit maybe, but isn't it saying that the big design is flawed because somebody who should not have been raptured had been raptured?
Wait, what do you mean?
She's presumably one of the good people if she was raptured. Yeah. And then she got kicked out. Doesn't that mean heaven made a mistake? And if they make a mistake once, can they make it again?
I wouldn't say they've made a mistake, no, because what we believe in, like, God knows everything. So, like, you could say the same thing for Lucifer when he got kicked out of heaven. It's like, okay, people were asking, well, didn't God know that Lucifer was going to rebel? God knew that. So he knows the order of everything. So with her, you could just compare that situation with Lucifer.
Okay, so the mom is Lucifer.
No, I'm not saying she's Lucifer. I'm saying the events of what happened is similar to Lucifer.
Okay. Another one is, I think one, I don't want to spend the entire thing on this, but I think this is a satire about religion, right? Or religious ideas, right? There's millions of people out there who believe that the rapture will happen in our lifetime, right? So I do think you can make a joke about anything, and I think you can satirize anything, but you have to have a point. So that is kind of what I'm getting at with all of these questions, right? Like, is it making a point? Is it doing something worthwhile, or is it just poking people for the sake of it? And then there's one scene where it gets a little bit more explicit in terms of the criticism, right? Which is when they talk about how to imprison the beast. And they have this whole thing about the devil can be sealed away for 1,000 years. And then Ben goes on a rant about how the whole thing is not thought through and nobody fact-checked this. And like, what sense does this make? Why only 1,000 years and all of that? And that is kind of taking a swing, right? By saying all of this whole thing is nonsense.
I mean, I don't know, because you're the more like religious guy, so I don't know if you wanted to defend it.
Guys, I'm not the more religious guy. Yeah, I'm Christian. I got a relationship with God, but I'm not like that. Like, religious. Like, I like to say I got a relationship with God, but I get what you're saying. Okay, so in terms of I didn't really take it as a swing. Like I get it, but I didn't take it as them criticizing Christianity from a, let me use the word, vulgar sense. Like, because there are many things in the Bible where I question, I'm like, oh, okay, why is it done like this? Why is it done like that? So I kind of saw it like that. But also, just to add to that, he is locked away for 1,000 years. But I think there's another. I think it's a thing where after that, then they will cease to be exist. Like, they will cease to exist after that. I don't know if it's straight after 1,000 years, but I do know, yeah, he'll be locked up, and then afterwards, everyone in hell, including Lucifer, they'll no longer exist. But I don't know that. Like, I don't know where in the timeline that is, but I do know that's after that.
And there's more like an example of something that feels a bit arbitrary from an outside perspective, right? Like, why 1,000 years? And why can you not just throw away the key and never let him out again, right? One of the questions I had in this was, like, at least to me, like, I went through a phase like 20 years ago where I kind of just took an interest in just the teachings of religions, right? Like, I never practiced any of them, but just to kind of learn about them and kind of figure out what it is people believe, right? And this movie seems to be like it deliberately does not go into any kind of detail on this. Like, is this satisfying to watch if it's like, if you know, like, the actual story more than maybe I do, or is that obviously just a comedy and it's just backdrop? And would this movie have been better or worse if it had actually referenced more stuff from, say, the Book of Revelation, for instance? And it basically just takes a few very surface level stuff, like there's blood raining from the sky and stuff like that, right? So it's just like a couple of very high level stuff that pretty much everybody has heard, but there's no deep cuts in this. There's like, nobody read Revelation and just said, okay, here are the pieces we're gonna put into this comedy and make jokes about, right? It deliberately is not that kind of movie. The question is, number one, did you expect that? And number two, would it have been better if it was?
I think in terms of would it be better, potentially narratively wise, because like the whole idea of, you know, him just wanting to kind of get with this girl, and that was like the main kind of like driving point of the movie. It was good and bad. I think in terms of like the jokes and some of like the crudeness of it. Sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't work. And I'm not like 100% familiar with like the Book of Revelations. I don't know kind of the ins and outs of it. I didn't even know like the blood rain came from the Book of Revelations or anything like that. But in terms of feeding a little bit more off of something like that, I think, I don't know, and making it a little bit more, well, actually, I was going to say make it a little bit more explicit, but I guess if you know it, and you kind of know some of the references behind it. But I don't know, if there was like a piece in there that could have like shaped the narrative and shaped how the story of the Antichrist played out, then I think they probably should have taken it, just again because the whole like narrative of him wanting to sleep with her and like, you know, wanting to get with her and create this beautiful baby, and maybe the whole like creating a baby thing or like the perfect baby is probably from the Book of Revelations as well. Maybe I'm misreading that. I don't know, but I don't know. It just seemed like we could have done something a little bit better than him just, you know, making all these like dick jokes about this girl, or to this girl.
One thing I do know about Revelation is that the Antichrist is described in very, like, with a lot of detail. Like, it just keeps going on and on about all the different traits that you will have. And like, they're not vague at all. They're not just a generic collection of bad traits. They're all very, like, it's like there's a very specific picture being painted, right? And for example, they could have just taken that as the character design of the character, right? And they don't really do that very much, right? I think the only thing they really take is that he can get crowds to support him, that kind of thing, and that means he's kind of a regional politician who gets people fired up. But I think that's about it in terms of actually following the source material, if you will.
I think they were trying to be cautious, because even though they were, of course, there were, you know, events, you know, that a lot of people are familiar with. I think they weren't trying to go like too overboard with a lot more because of, you know, the potential backlash. Because this was released in 2013, right?
Yep.
So even though that was a time where, like, especially like a lot of the humor that I was seeing in this, I was like, maybe they might not even get away with that now, which was funny, by the way. But I'm like, I don't think they'll get away with that now. But it was still a time where I wouldn't say people were more sensitive in comparison to now, because now we are very sensitive. But I would say it's definitely a time where if you are like, you know, bashing a religion, especially Christianity, then, you know, you're gonna get in trouble. So I think they're trying to play a sensible line.
Yeah, I think the humor is very typical of that time. Just very crude, very irreverent. just not taking anything seriously, that sort of thing. So there's something that circa 2010 to 2015 was kind of the norm. I think that's where that's coming from. And basically, my point in asking all of these questions is you kind of would expect it to be more about religion than it ends up being, right? Based on its premise and how it's being presented and all of that, right? But what it actually is kind of a very middle class, very mundane, very suburban type of apocalypse, right? Like there are all these incredible things happening. There's blood raining from the sky. There's meteors constantly just destroying stuff. There's demons and zombies and swearing crows that antagonize people all day long. And it's all
Those are
kind
my
of just,
favorites. Sorry, just to
yeah,
interrupt you. That was my favorite. The first introduction of the insect. What's the insect called? Sorry.
like the cricket that just yells suffer.
Yeah, he was freaking. That was freaking hilarious.
And then you've got the birds who are just antagonizing people and just being vulgar the entire, like, all day long. And you get used to it. It's like a bad commute, right? It's like the annoying guy next to you on the train or whatever. It's all very mundane, right? And nobody's excited about anything. And people are kind of sitting in front of the TV and and then Orlando gets nuked and they're a bit sad about it, but ultimately it doesn't impact them, right? And then Satan is introduced and he's just a bad boss and he's just middle management, right? It's like if you've had a job with like an annoying boss who was kind of overbearing and didn't know what he was doing. That's him, right? Like that's the beast in this movie.
Are you kind of getting to a point where it was, so obviously you kind of mentioned it was like less about religion, so I don't know, I'm trying to get like the point that you're trying to make. Was it that this is just more like suburban living, like day in the life of like, someone in suburban whilst the apocalypse is kind of going on?
Yeah, basically. So instead of being like an attack on religion, it's using the rapture as a metaphor for just suburban life. And you go to your office job and it's annoying you, and your boss is a jerk and he makes your life harder for no reason. And your commute is annoying. And the person, I don't know, like at the drive-through gives you the wrong thing and you're annoyed. You know what I mean? It's all nuisance, right? Like if that's your life, right? Like all the bad things that happen in your life, they on a day-to-day level are just nuisances and they just kind of add up. And that's kind of what the apocalypse is like in this movie.
And do you think it was intentional? Because I don't know whether they were trying to be too smart with this movie, or whether they were actually, kind of being smart and trying to portray that intentionally. But for me, it just kind of seemed like they were just doing. I don't know. Maybe it was intentional to sort of portray that lifestyle.
I do think it's intentional, and I think that that's the joke. The joke is that you have these monumental cosmic events, and they're just like a bad job at some company. That's what that's like.
I think I got it on the smaller scale in terms of like when they were like sat in front of the TV. I actually thought that was like kind of one of my highlights of it. But I don't know. I didn't like piece it together and get like the overall narrative of it. And I think the dick jokes and the sexual jokes kind of take away from that a little bit. But then you can kind of like just tie that to sexual harassment from a boss that you work for that's kind of just like trying to manipulate you essentially. So it actually does kind of tie into the narrative that you're mentioning there.
And who you can't say no to. Like, even if you're not the target of the harassment, even just having to sit through it can be really annoying, but you can't say anything because you really need to keep that job, right? Because losing it is a huge hassle. And that's kind of what it reminded me, like, as people were kind of just, it's not just that, right? But just everything the Beast says is just crass and crude and obnoxious. And he treats everybody poorly. And nobody can, like, he does not actually threaten anybody, really. Like, everybody just needs to be in his good graces because they need this job, because the world is in such a bad place that people can't just go get another job, right? But because they've tried, and it's also bleak that they kind of have to play nice with this jerk, right? Like, I think anybody who's had like a bad boss, like in a corporate environment, knows what that's like, where you can kind of sit through it, but you'd rather not. But walking away is just too difficult, and it's too much of a disruption to your life. So you just sit through it, and you wait until it's over. All of this stuff with the Beast, that's kind of how I interpreted that. Like, that's what they were channeling when they wrote those scenes.
Yeah, I can see it. I can see it. To be fair, as you're explaining it, I think it improves it a little bit because like some of that was like missed on me, or I kind of wasn't like sort of taking that in completely. So actually, when you're saying that and you kind of like pair it together with like the dad as well, the one that is like telling his son to kind of fall in line as well, and it kind of speaks to sort of parenting as well. And when you're kind of being told to kind of fall in line, don't question authority and don't question like your boss and this that and the other. You just have to like play nice up until like the kid kind of defies it, does something different, and then he's just like so relieved and he's like so like, oh, I knew you could do it. Or and it kind of, it's almost like when like someone wanted to be like a YouTuber growing up, or like wanted to do music, and then everyone's like, oh no, you can't do it, and then the minute that they actually are successful, they're like, oh, I always believed in you and whatever. It kind of speaks to that as well, which is funny. So actually, that observation improves the movie for me slightly.
The dad is not really like he wants the best for his son, but that the best is still pretty awful. It's a bit like it's a bit like you said, the son wants to do other things, but the dad is convinced that taking this job is the best thing for him, and so he's going to make him. And I think that is something that a lot of people can relate to. Even though I have a bunch of positive things to say about this movie, I don't think it's that much of a masterpiece. Like, I don't think there's like brilliant satire here, but I do think there's a little bit more to it than I think people give it credit for. And if you look up this movie, it does not have a published budget. It does not have a box office. It has 25% on Rotten Tomatoes. So this movie was basically completely ignored and dismissed. And if you go into the reviews on Rotten Tomatoes, it's just full of people trashing it, how much trash it is, how it doesn't live up to its potential, about how it wastes the talent of all these comedians. And I do think there's a little bit more here. Like, it's a very simple joke and it's very silly. It's basically a vehicle for Craig Robinson to say some crude stuff. Like, it's like looking at this in 2025, where we're used to very sanitized entertainment. It's kind of jarring how explicit he gets, even though in 2013 this was pretty normal. Or not normal, like not every movie was like this, but you could get movies like this, right? And I actually think the movie works better than it should, in part because it's got some really talented people in it, but also because I think just the plot structure of it is really good. Like, if you just look at how the plot unfolds, there's not a lot of noise. There's some stuff like with the stoner friends and with the demons that doesn't go terribly far. But fundamentally, Ben and Lindsay are trying to get this sandwich cart off the ground because they're just trying to just earn a living in the post-apocalypse, right? And then through sheer chance, that gets taken away from them because a meteor destroys the card, and they are back to they've put all the money into this, and now it's gone. And Ben's father works for the beast, so he gets him a foot in the door, and that's when the beast kind of becomes aware of Lindsay and starts hitting on her aggressively. And then that's when they formulate this plan of imprisoning the beast and kind of putting an end to all of this, right? And I think it's a very, like, just watching this again just 2 days ago, I was kind of reminded of how clean the story structure is, about how one thing logically leads to the next. And there's not really any big gaps in the story. There's no big question marks about why characters are doing what they're doing. And it just feels very satisfying to watch, I think, at least for me.
Yeah, I was gonna say one thing that I like actually noticed and made note of was the fact that the neighbor that was like mowing his grass, when they kind of like first introduce it just seems like it's just like another random thing that's happening because of the apocalypse, and it's just like dumb, and it's like meant to be kind of be played for laughs. But then he actually ties back into the plot and how like they sort of go about trying to distract the guards to get to the beast and stuff like that. So it actually served a narrative purpose, and I like noted that, and I was like, oh, like that's not clever. Like it's not the most clever thing to do, but I was like, oh, I appreciate the movie for doing that, for like setting something up and actually building it up and actually giving it a little bit more meaning to the story, as opposed to just doing a joke or trying to like make fun of something for the sake of like making fun of something. And it kind of still all ties back into the suburban living of the father that's just like constantly mowing their grass, or that image that you have of like people mowing their grass in in those nice neighborhoods.
Yeah, he's not doing anything fun with his eternity, right? He's just doing a chore. If you live in suburbia, you will find people who take the stuff really seriously, like where their lawn is their life or something like that. And that kind of rang true on that. But then, like you said, it's set up in the beginning, and then it's paid off in the end, because the zombie neighbor who is really into his lawnmowers is integral to pulling off the plan, right? As such as it is. And similarly, the stoner friends are similar, where it kind of ties into this idea of hopelessness and why do anything, and everything sucks, and there's no point in doing anything. But then in the end, if I remember correctly, the guards are distracted with the weed from the stoner friends, right? So it all kind of ties together. It all kind of pays off, and it's not like this is genius screenwriting. It's not like this is some great piece of art, but it works. And somebody sat down and made sure that the plot made sense. Like, even though there's some hard turns in this, right? That kind of ends with Satan and God dead in a jacuzzi, and Jesus has been lasered to death on his Pegasus as he was returning to Earth. Like, it's weird, right? It takes some wild turns towards the end, but like each step makes sense, and you understand why everybody does what they're doing. And I think that's like that goes a long way towards making a movie hold together and be satisfying.
Even when you mentioned about like the whole like Jesus being lasered by the thing, they set that up again. Like throughout the whole movie, they set a bunch of things up and pay it off like afterwards. Like you really get that satisfaction of they're mentioning something like really weird that's going to happen, or like, you know, something that's like outlandish, and you almost like half forget about it. You almost forget about it, and then it happens, and you're like, oh yeah, like they actually set that up, which is a clever thing to do. Because like again, some movies just don't do it.
Yeah, there's nothing really that comes out of left field, and if it does, it sticks around and ends up mattering in the end, right? So I do think the movie kind of just on a basic make the script work level, I think deserves, I think, some props that it doesn't usually get.
I feel like, just to add to like, you know, the main thing that we're talking about, main point that we're talking about why people were trashing this film. I think I'm actually guilty of this, but I think it might be because they turned into like they turned into an inspector rather than a viewer. Because for me, it was hard to focus on the story itself and pick up on the stuff that you guys have mentioned. I'll be honest with you, because stuff that you guys mentioned, I was like, oh, okay, like the metaphor for this and the metaphor for that. I was like, okay, I can see that. So when I was just like reflecting just now, I was like, okay, I think the reason why I didn't pick up on these stuff is because I was inspecting, trying to see if they're going to take the piss. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, well, how far are they going to take the piss? So I think a lot of viewers were like pretty much like me as well, where subconsciously they're not even really watching it. They're just inspecting it to see, okay, where are they going to take the piss? Oh my God, are they going to do like what's happening next? You know what I'm saying? So I think that's where a lot of, maybe some, not even a lot of, but some of the criticism comes from.
If you grew up in like the 2000s and 2010s, like I have, you were used to heavier stuff when it comes to criticizing religion, right? Like there's some South Park episodes that get quite crude in their attacks on Christianity, right? And it's not hard to dismiss this as just trash, right? It looks very cheap. It's kind of got like everybody's got this jaded, sarcastic tone that essentially yells at the audience, don't take this seriously, because we sure didn't. And the effects are really cheap, and in the end God shows up and he looks like somebody who is scamming people in Las Vegas, right? You know what I mean? Like it's all very cheap and all very easy to dismiss, I think.
I was just kind of questioning the target audience for something like this, and whether the subject matter would match the target audience. Because like again, with some of it, like Jonathan, you were saying, where you kind of wasn't recognizing or wasn't like kind of getting it. I wasn't either. The elements of it kind of being related to your boss, I think everyone can relate to that. But I think some of like the more suburban stuff, some more the sort of kind of that way of life doesn't always immediately kind of like jump out at you, like, oh, like, you know, they're really like satiring this, or like making satire of this, just because it's not related to like my day-to-day life. So yeah, they're taking the piss out of something, but because I'm not in it, and I'm like not completely in the sort of like group that they're kind of like satiring or whatever, sometimes you can kind of miss it. And I wondered whether that was kind of part of the, especially when you're saying that nobody watched this movie, really and truthfully, it's like maybe the people that did watch it, just it wasn't part of like they just kind of weren't part of the group that was being satired in this.
So this came out, I think, on video on demand, like in the pre-streaming days. It got a limited theatrical release, and the box office is not published. So I think it just flew under everybody's radar, and I think tonally it's fairly typical for comedies from that era, like the whole stoner humor and the whole crassness for its own sake. And it's also not a very thorough takedown of like religion in general, right? So put all of these together, and I think it's easy to say, well, this is just not a very good, like I've seen this before, and this is not a very good version of that. And I think that is ultimately why I think people are very quick to dismiss it. And I'm not necessarily saying they're wrong. It's ultimately the tone works for you or it doesn't. Like personally, I just get a kick out of like a high concept. If you have an outlandish idea and you just run with it and you just do a few interesting things, if you do that 4 or 5 times during a movie, that can be enough. And if the rest of it is at least serviceable, that can be enough to hold the movie together. And for me, that's pretty much how this movie works. But I do think there's a little bit more to it than people give it credit for. So we talked a little bit about the beast, right? About how he's crass, he's vulgar, he's an awful person. He's kind of a loser, right? He's not imposing, he's not threatening. Any other thoughts before we move on to the other characters?
The Beast is funny for me because obviously I can resonate with him because, well, not Antichrist, but as in like the character, the actor itself, and like its humor is because that's a lot of things that you'll see in like black movies, his type of humor. So the way it's just the mixture of that and him being the Antichrist was very entertaining, especially like his interactions with his bodyguards, the main guy as well. When he was in the scene where he was looking himself in the mirror, practicing obviously what he's going to do to the girl, and then the guy, his main bodyguard, was amping him up, and then it turned awkward. That was hilarious. That was just like a perfect match, in terms of the actor for the character.
For me, it was like all his interactions with his son, which is so like it's hilarious because it was like almost giving like caring parent, but he'd do it in like the most aggressive way possible, and it was just like hilarious. And it's like, I don't know, again, like you kind of mentioned, like the black community or whatever like that. You kind of like relate to that, where like someone's trying to be a caring parent, but they're just like shouting all the time, or like they're just like a bit too harsh and a bit too aggressive and stuff like that. And it was just like, I was the one where he like wanted him to read him a bedtime story or something like that, wanted him to say goodnight or something like that. And I can't remember exactly what he said, but that one got me. That one was like flipping hilarious.
Daniel, I was gonna ask, you've seen black movies, right? So the way I asked that was a bit crazy. So did his kind of like his character and his person, do you know what I'm saying? You get what we mean about like the whole black humor thing, right? You kind of, because you've seen black movies, so you kind of understand. You understand it, right? So for you, did it work with someone like that to be the Antichrist?
I didn't really get that vibe from him. I got the sense more of like this is just like a shock comic from like 2008.
Okay.
That kind of thing. Right? Like being as vulgar as possible and as crude as possible and explicit as possible. I kind of associate that with like mediocre comedians from that era.
Okay, I get what you're saying.
Yeah, the crudeness, well, for me anyways, the crudeness and like, just like the vulgar language isn't what worked for me, or isn't why I like the character. I think he was like very mixed. I think it was like a very mixed bag. But I think kind of what Jonathan's referring to is like some of the mannerisms or some of the like kind of more like subtleties of like the jokes and like how he was kind of playing off some of the other things were just kind of, I don't know, a little bit more related to like stuff that you might see from like in those black movies, which I got a kick out of. But him just kind of listing off like dick-shaped foods and stuff like that, I was like, okay, we're not, like that's not great.
And I was asking that as always because maybe that's another reason why there was a lot of criticism around the film, because a lot of the times you wouldn't associate like how they put it regarding like the mannerism. You really wouldn't associate those type of mannerisms with an Antichrist in the film. A lot of the times it's just not that. Do you know what I'm saying? So maybe that's where a lot of the criticism comes from, because it was from a different outlook and a different take.
I've not seen those specific criticisms, but I can kind of see that. Like it's definitely like if the Antichrist appears in a movie as a character, he's usually very dignified, very grand, very scheming, that kind of thing, right? Like that's kind of what you expect. And I think that's part of the joke, that he's just not that he's just very unimpressive as a person.
Yeah.
To tie that back to your question, like this like remind me of archetypes from black movies and his extreme displays of wealth, and like there's gold everywhere and he's constantly bragging. Like that's an archetype like that, right? So that kind of tied into that. I don't think it necessarily wanted to be exactly that. It's more like he's like the techiest rich person you've ever met.
Yeah, I agree.
I mean, all I'm getting is we need to get Daniel to watch some black comedies, but we'll get there.
Yeah, let's do it.
We're gonna make that.
I've seen a few.
We need to find one that's gonna blow your socks off for 2020.
Friday or Friday after next or something like that. We'll do the job.
We've done some of the like heavy stuff, like Boys in the Hood and stuff like that. Let's do some outrageous stuff.
Yeah. We'll look for something.
We've got a few.
All right, let's do it. All right. How about God?
Oh,
Which
he
one was
kind of
God?
annoyed me,
Was
to
it
be fair.
the
The
Asian guy,
Asian
right?
with the
Ken
beard,
Jeong,
yeah.
yeah. Mhm.
I don't know. I didn't like that portrayal, and not from like a religious perspective or anything like that at all. I just kind of thought that they could have played that a little bit differently.
How do you think they should have played it within the logic of the movie?
No, I think the comedy was right. I just don't think I really liked the actor and his kind of tone and mannerisms behind it. But there were like elements of it that were like entertaining, I guess, in like when he's like kind of confronting them about killing his son.
I've been working on this for 4,000 years and then this. Do you
Yeah,
have any idea how much work this was?
yeah. Like the problem isn't the lines. I think the problem was just the actor. And you get someone that's a little bit better or a little bit more funnier than what he was to deliver some of the lines, and I think it works a whole lot better for me. But I kind of was just like rolling my eyes a little bit at him. I was like, oh, man, get him off my screen.
And Ken Jeong is hilarious. Like if you've not seen him in other stuff, he's in The Hangover.
I've seen The Hangover. He's in The Hangover. Again, he's a bit too over the top for me in something like The Hangover. I don't think I've ever like watched The Hangover and like really enjoyed him in The Hangover as opposed to like some of the other comedians that they have in there.
And the only thing I remember about Ken Jeong from The Hangover is that he does full frontal nudity in each one. And the first time it kind of made sense. And after that, they do what they can to contrive a situation where he can just take his pants off. And I'm okay with that. In addition to that, he's also in Community, and he's also great there. And what I kind of liked about him here is that he's just annoyed. Like his personality is being annoyed at what these humans are doing to his design. That's basically the joke, right? Like that he's supposed to be the protector and give guidance and love and all of that. And he's just a guy who, like, you just trampled over his flower bed and he has to fix it, and he's annoyed with you that you created extra work for him. That's kind of the joke, right?
Pretty much what you're seeing from the film and the events you're seeing from the film is not what you would expect it. So especially from the Antichrist's behavior, you wouldn't expect him to behave that way. And with God, you wouldn't expect him to behave that way because he's like omnibenevolent and all seeing, and and one of the main things about him is very loving. So when I was watching, I was like, you know what? If God was human like us, he would react that way. So that's why I saw it as first time. I'm a big fan of his character. I forgot his name, Ken Jeong. I was going to say Kim. Lord have mercy, they're about to cook me in the comment section. But yeah. So I'm a big fan of him. So I think so that's already like. Already, like I said, I liked his character, and if I was God, I would react that way because like humans are just pissing me off at this point. Do you know what I'm saying? Especially the whole line about it took me 4,000 years to do this. You know what I'm saying? So I found it fitting. It made sense.
I struggle to think of a characterization that would be anything else in this movie. Like at that point, we've spent like over an hour seeing all of the other parts of the end times, and by the time he shows up, it can't be anything else, right? It has to be kind of the annoyed parent kind of thing.
It just wouldn't have been fitting for the story that was being told.
Yeah, I think it's pretty much what it is. And maybe you can quibble with like individual lines or say, okay, it's maybe not that funny or whatever. But there's actually not that many jokes in this, right? Like it's all the situation, it's all how these characters act.
Yeah, because everyone's quite serious in it. Well, for the I'm as serious as you like can be in this type of movie, but no one's like
People aren't telling jokes.
Yeah, I was gonna say Airplane, but Airplane's not that either. Airplane's kind of like the situation is all. I think it's kind of similar.
I was gonna add to that as well and say like I think majority of the humor comes from the chemistry and just interactions between themselves. So that's why for me, that's what I'm saying. Like that was one of my highlights of the film was just the way that they just work well together. They were just performing well together. It just felt very fluid, and the humor came from normal conversation. I don't know how to explain that, but it literally just came from normal conversation, and and just the awkwardness. And it came from realism as well. That's why I'm referring to the mom as well. Like the way that the mom was just acting out and like she was breaking down was just so realistic and so funny. And like it wasn't even over the top. Like a lot of the times with like these type of movies, one thing I don't really like is very theatrical and they're trying to be like too funny where it's to the point where it's immature. But the way that the mom was behaving, it wasn't like it was just she was saying the right things.
Having a mental breakdown because none of it makes sense. She's just sitting at the kitchen table crying, screaming why over and over. In the end, she becomes a stoner and kind of finds common cause with her son's stoner friends and she kind of likes them because they are really chill and are providing her with weed, and they like her because when they get the munchies, she's got some cookies ready. They just click in the end, and she's just at peace with the meaninglessness of it all. Whereas in the beginning, she was the religion, like the devout churchgoer, right? Who was the only one in the family who got raptured. And there's even like the dad at one point says maybe we should have just gone with her, like all those years, and then we would be together still. And then she comes back because she's too annoying and has been complaining to the manager in heaven. And then she has this mental breakdown because her entire world or worldview has collapsed, right? And she can't handle it. And then like her daughter is being pursued by the Antichrist, and then in the end she becomes a stoner and everything is fine. That's early 2010s in a nutshell. Moving on to the ending. So in the end, God and Satan fight, and they kind of stumble into a jacuzzi and get electrocuted, and they kind of just float there and everything is fine. And there's a brief power struggle where everybody asks, okay, who's in charge now? Like the cosmic order is dead. The people in charge are dead. The world is in ruins, but who gets to be in charge? And then one of them, I think it's Ben, says, nobody's in charge. We just live. From now on, we just live our lives. And then fast forward like 6 months, and they've opened their sandwich restaurant, and the demons are getting jobs, and Lindsay is pregnant, meaning there's a future, right? Like life is moving on, right? They're not all just waiting to die. There's actually life happening, and it's all fine. Like everybody is happy. Any thoughts on that one?
That's where I thought it got a bit personal. No, I don't have an issue with, people's point of view. So that's why I wasn't offended by this at all. It just told me that, okay, this is what I thought was, okay, this is their view on how life should be in general and their view on religion. Number one, they don't believe in it. Number two, they believe that you should just live life the way that you want to live life. Obviously, with the death of God and with the death of Satan in that jacuzzi. And obviously just with that line as well and how everything transpired, everyone's living so freely and just really not caring. And just living. And I was like, okay, yeah, that tells me their personal view. Maybe I just took it wrong, but yeah, that's what I got from that.
That's pretty much what it is, right? Like every authority figure, everybody who could provide any kind of guidance is just a disappointment or a distraction or actually actively in the way of people living their lives, right? And with that gone, people can just live. They have their job, they have their house, they have their family, and that's it. And like in a movie that is all about how bleak suburban existence is, like in the end, it kind of like they don't escape it, right? Ultimately, they have a very mundane life in the end, right? Like there's nothing, like they're not king and queen of the world, or like there's no big revolution and there's no golden age. Like people just go back to life, like go back to their lives, and they kind of do their thing, and it's all pretty unremarkable. And that's the happy ending.
Would we say it's happy though?
Well, what's unhappy about it?
They're kind of living with no purpose. You could argue that they're living with no purpose, because if people are already taken, right? So people are already taken to heaven. I don't think no one's taken to hell in this point. But low key, you could argue that is hell on earth, because obviously everyone's taken to heaven, and obviously Satan came to earth. He died on earth. I'm saying what I'm seeing from that. So
that's what it's supposed to be in the story, right? Like,
yeah.
Earth is supposed to turn into hell, essentially, right?
Yeah.
And it's not really, right? It's all just annoying. It's all just annoying.
I hear that, but at the same time, when they're saying we should just live, that could also be interpreted as, okay, you're just living, but that's not really a purpose in a way, as well. You're just living to die. So when people live to die, a lot of the times you associate that with depression.
Maybe, but did they have that much purpose before? Like this big cosmic order existed, but what has it ever done for them?
I hear that. But now they definitely don't have purpose.
Well, they have their families. They're raising a child. They have a job. They're building a business. That's all purpose.
I see that. It's I see where you're coming from.
And I think ultimately that is kind of like one of the reasons why I was kind of a little like it's been a few years since I watched this. I just kind of vaguely remembered it as this crude stoner comedy, right? And I did not quite remember how earnest the ending was, because throughout the entire movie, it's all very jaded. It's all very too cool for school. It's all very like you're stupid for caring about stuff, right? Like in the beginning, the mom was weird for going to church and caring about it, right? And she was also weird for having this mental breakdown when She gets kicked out of heaven and all of that. Like, all the main characters in this are kind of not really the caring types, right? Like, they care about each other, but they don't have like big ideals. They don't have big goals, anything like that. And in the end, it's kind of heartfelt. And you would think that if that was like, I think the average stoner comedy does not get quite as sincere in the end, where it just has a quite emotional and caring ending, right? Where ultimately the people in our lives are what matters, and we've got that now, and that's all we could ever ask for, kind of thing. Like, it's like, you know what I mean? Like, it's not nihilistic in the end. It's actually quite sappy if you think about it.
I see where you're coming from. Even though I took it differently, but I can see where you're coming from.
All right. Any other comments on Rapture-Palooza before we wrap it up?
All in all, I'm not mad at what I watched. It definitely gave me the humor I was not expecting, and it gave me the story that I was not expecting also. Of course, there were some expected parts, but mainly the end and their viewpoint. But in terms of just the story as a whole, I say, like I said, it was cool, man. I wasn't mad at what I watched, and like I said, there were a lot of funny moments.
For me, I think this is probably the best time of year to kind of watch this type of movie where you're with family or with friends and
Oh yeah, watch this with your grandparents. How dare you?
100%. Not that type of family. When I say family, I mean like siblings or something like that, or if you're like with cousins or something along the lines, and you just kind of want to put something dumb and fun on and just to like laugh at it together. I think it's like, I mean, it's not the best one that you can watch, but you know, it's in the genre and it's in the bracket of type of movies that you should watch at this time of year. And one that I am adding to my list that we haven't talked about previously or whatever is Rush Hour. Like, this is always a great time to watch Rush Hour. Is this time of year? So I think that will like come on at some point. But
Rush Hour 4 coming.
hopefully. But I think overall the best thing I can say about the movie is the amount of times I said this is dumb throughout the whole movie, and in a good way of like this is dumb, but it's like funny. And yeah, it's just thoroughly entertaining with a serviceable story as well. I think we touched on it a little bit before, but like with a serviceable story where it's just not a bunch of things happening, which makes it really fun. Minus the crudeness.
See, for me, the crudeness was part of the appeal. It's just like I could absolutely see how Craig Robinson was just having some fun on set, just coming up. I'm sure they kind of just let him go for half an hour, and he would just come up with stuff. I'm
Do
sure.
you know what it is? It's part of it was like fine, and then it just, I don't know, there was just like elements of it that just kept like crossing the line. And I'm not one that's like super sensitive to any of this stuff, but it just kept crossing the line sometimes of like, okay, you've gone on for a little bit too long with some of this stuff. But yeah, no, it was overall fine.
Did this make you want to see more like 2010s comedies, like from around 2010?
Oh, 100%. I said about Rush Hour, but actually I've not watched Pineapple Express in a very long time. I kind of just want to stick that on, and I'm kind of scared that it's like I'm not gonna have like the same reaction to it that I did when I was younger, when I watched it before. But it definitely made me want to watch some Is it Seth Rogen? Is it Seth Rogen?
Mm-hmm.
What's his name again? It's
Yeah.
Seth Rogen, isn't it? Yeah, it made me want to watch some like kind of dumb Seth Rogen comedies.
Yeah, we have to talk about Your Highness at some point. Have you seen that?
I actually haven't. If that's Seth Rogen, then I'm all the way in.
I'm not sure if Seth Rogen is involved in this, but it's like a fantasy movie, but it's a stoner comedy. We have to do that at some point. But it's like very much in this vein as well, right? Where you have a pretty straightforward plot, and then you hang some really crude jokes on it that are kind of vaguely inspired by fantasy movies or like the fantasy genre.
I'm down. I'm game for this, especially this time of year. I'm game.
All right, sounds like a plan. All right, shall we wrap it up?
Thank you very much, guys, for tuning into today's episode.
If you reach this part of the episode, as always, we appreciate you pressing play, and we appreciate you rocking with us and giving us a listen. And as always, if you liked what you heard today and you enjoyed our discussion, you should probably tell a friend. And if you hated everything and you thought we were chatting a bunch of nonsense, then I've got the perfect boss for you. We are the Eye of the Storm podcast.
All right, guys, thank you very much for tuning into today's episode. We will catch you next time. Au revoir.
Ciao.
Bye-bye.